Hi, my name is Richard Hogg. I'm the CEO at Jackson Hogg. I'm often asked by many people, how do you go about rising through the ranks to manage a large engineering function? So I thought no better a person than Ian Ritchey, former chief engineer at Rolls-Royce, who has managed a team of 15,000 people. And I thought we'd just unpack Ian's career, what he's done and what he's doing now over his time since leaving Rolls-Royce. So Ian, tell me, where did the journey all begin?
So I guess if I go back to education, I started off thinking I was going to be a proper scientist, white coat in a lab and so forth. So I did a first degree, I did a master's degree, I did a PhD, I even got a research fellowship at university following that. But you get to a point where you realise there's a handful of people in the world understand what you're doing, and probably half of them at best actually care. And I just really felt a need to do something that was perceived to be of more value and more impact. So I started looking for a job in industry, and a little bit by chance, to be honest, landed up at Parsons Steam Turbines in Newcastle, that was where the journey started, because Parsons was part of Northern Engineering Industries, and Northern Engineering Industries became part of Rolls-Royce. And really, ever since then, my career's been based around Rolls-Royce, but it's been a little bit of a random walk through many different parts of Rolls-Royce.
And I think, Ian, that was one of the reasons you and I connected so much. I had the fortune of being sponsored through university by Parsons, then Siemens, and you and I have both worked with people in the same capacity. But interestingly, you then went on to rise through the ranks of Rolls-Royce, and then I've gravitated towards commercial engineering. So it's interesting how people can change routes. Tell me about your parents' background. Why did you go into science, Ian?
So my mother was a school teacher, and my father was a lecturer in engineering at what was then Newcastle Polytechnic. They were both sort of first generation of their family to go to university, and if you remember the Blair government mantra, education, 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 they firmly believed that the best and most important thing you could do in life was get a good education. And that was great advice, but I think that was what kind of put me on what maybe began to feel like a treadmill of you just do one degree and then you do the next degree and then you do the degree after that. So that was why go education. Science, really, because that was what I was good at, sort of thing. There wasn't a lot of sort of thought behind that. There was a little bit of advice from school, which I think was bad advice, which basically was along the lines of, I'll be careful how I say this, but if you're really clever, do science. If you're maybe not quite as clever, do engineering, sort of thing. That was the sort of the subliminal message coming through the school. So that was sort of, if you like, what steered me towards science rather than engineering. And I think, kind of with hindsight, I might have been better served by going straight into engineering rather than coming into engineering somewhat later in my career.
Absolutely. So early doors, an interest in science. Where did you go for university?
So I went to Cambridge for my first degree, and actually back to Cambridge for my PhD, and I did basically pure physics sort of thing all the way through that.
Was pure physics quite dry, or did you actually appreciate the breadth of the subject, given what you went on to do later in life?
So I think physics was great as an introduction. If I can digress slightly, there was a chap called Neville Mott, who got a Nobel Prize in physics, who actually said he studied mathematics because he knew he always wanted to be a physicist. and I think you sort of almost make the argument, I'll study physics because I want to be an engineer, sort of thing. You do get, I think, a lot of breadth, and that was very good. There was an element of physics degree, which I think is a bit like a maths degree. If you're good at it and can do it, it's actually quite an easy ride, sort of thing. There's not so much sort of book learning and swatting to do. You can either do it or you can't. I was lucky enough that I could do it. So I probably wasn't that challenged a lot of the way through university as a result.
That's interesting. So undergrad at Cambridge, into Parsons, steam turbines. How did you then, where did the journey go to take you into Rolls-Royce?
Okay, so to some extent that was a lot of chance, I think. So once I got into Parsons and realised I enjoyed it, I absolutely thought I could see my career out here at Parsons, and I could see a route that would, if I kept my head down, worked hard, I could see a route maybe I could be engineering director at Parsons one day. But then Rolls-Royce actually started taking an interest in some of the NEI group companies, and in particular taking an interest in both Parsons and Rolls. And they set up what they called an advanced engineering centre. But basically, the idea was it was a future projects, future technologies team to cover the industrial power group. And they scouted around the NEI businesses looking for some of the sort of brighter, younger engineers to put into that team. And literally, I was just lucky enough to get to get asked if I wanted to join that team. And I'll be honest, I sucked my teeth for quite a long time as to whether that was the right thing to do, because I could see this sort of quite attractive career path going up through Parsons. But I did jump to that team, and after a while, was then lucky enough to be promoted to run that team. And again, it was just sort of mind expanding, because that really was the first time I got proper visibility of the full breadth of a company like Rolls-Royce. What the opportunities in a company of that size were, but also just the fantastic range of engineering and technology that the company had. And I think without that sort of step into that wider role, it's almost like you don't know what you don't know, sort of thing. And I think I wouldn't have realised what I might have been missing.
Good. And then the movement through with Rolls-Royce, you've been identified as a high potential person put in this team. How quickly did the career move on from there?
So again, it felt like it was moving quite quickly. So
did you want it to move quickly, or were you thinking, actually, I'm just prepared to go with the flow here?
I think by that stage, I think that was the point at which I started to think, yes, I do want it to move quickly. And I think it was the point at which I thought I could see myself doing, a reasonably senior engineering job in Rolls-Royce. I mean, you say the high potential piece. I think, just to be clear, the company's view of my potential was mixed. A lot of key people in the company, including the people who were the main board engineer directors at the time, had a very positive view of me. Equally, I did various times the company has run these sort of potential assessment programs, sort of thing. There was one in particular called Leadership High Potential. I failed the Leadership High Potential assessment sort of thing.
Why would you fail that?
I think largely the reason I failed it was because I'm actually quite a deeply introverted person. That came out in a lot of the personality profiling. I didn't fit the quite stereotypical profile that the consultants running the program felt they were looking for, which was sort of a kind of lead from the front, extrovert type personality sort of thing. Now, interestingly, there were some very successful senior people in Rolls-Royce who were probably a much more similar personality type to me. So I think there was some misjudgment there as to what they were looking for. But I certainly wasn't. As I say, certainly many people saw my potential, but I wasn't ever on sort of the high potential list, if you see what I mean. But yes, I definitely saw that there were jobs in Rolls-Royce that I wanted to do, and I think I'd gotten to the point where I realised you could achieve more and get a greater sense of achievement by working through a big team than you ever could by doing good work yourself, sort of thing.
And how early did you realise that? Because many people don't always realise that. I know it looks obvious once you grasp it, but there are many people that start off with very single-minded attitude. I'm going to get on, I'm going to progress, I, and then very quickly they realise that the team side.
So it started for me at Parsons, I guess. And again, I started off as really a specialist doing fluid dynamics on blade design, and I was part of a team developing some new blades. And again, just by chance, got the chance to then lead that team. That was, I suppose, the light bulb moment that said, when I first led the team, I thought, actually, this is a pain in the neck because I've got less time for doing my fluid dynamics, because it's not like they took the other job away from me. Usual story. I was leading the team and still doing the team member job. So initially I was quite deeply frustrated because I was getting less time to do the hard sums, as it were. But it was as time went on, I sort of realised, but the sense of achievement I'm getting from, you know, we deliver the finished package rather than I just deliver my little piece of it. So it kind of grew then, but that's the, you know, you're kind of level one. I'm looking after my team around me. It was as I got into Rolls-Royce and saw these much bigger organisations functioning, and sort of could start to see myself, you know, being in that sort of model where you actually had a large organisation with some structure to it. So yeah. Again, I was fairly fortunate though that I was just sort of progressively getting slightly larger scopes, and as Rolls-Royce closed down the Tyneside operations, you know, that could have been pretty negative, but actually got the opportunity to move my team down to Derby and inherited a team in Derby as part of that. So again, that was all kind of growth, and was all looking quite positive. But actually at that point, I decided it wasn't the right time for personal reasons to move to Derby. So I actually left Rolls-Royce for a brief period and took a job as a professor at Newcastle University, which was an interesting choice. I only did it for kind of 18 months, which I think was some frustration to the university, because that's whilst a reasonable time to do some jobs in industry is sort of in decent haste by academic standards.
How did you start progressing through the ranks of Rolls, and what divisions within Rolls-Royce did you actually get involved with?
So initially, and it was all basically the power generation side. You know, that was obviously where I'd started in Parsons, and that was where the part of the business that I grew up in. Actually, when I first moved that team down to Derby, that was my first exposure to aerospace. I had my power generation team that I took down, and I inherited an aerospace-focused team, and that was quite a shock to my system, because I think the first thing you realise in aerospace is it's so big and so complex, you can't know it all. You know, actually, in most power generation projects, certainly in my experience up to then, if you kind of work hard enough, you can get your head around most of it, sort of thing. And just in aerospace, you just never can. It's just too big and too complicated, and you're too reliant on your specialists. So I had a bit of aerospace and a bit of power generation. I then left and came back, and I actually came back into initially the nuclear submarines part of the business, and not really knowing anything about nuclear engineering or submarines. But that was one of the great things about Rolls-Royce. Once you've kind of established some credibility, the company was usually prepared to take a risk to move you around between different areas, as long as you were prepared to make the move. And it was a little bit like I decided I want to go back to Rolls-Royce. Company was keen to have me back, but the only kind of suitable opportunity at the right level happened to be in the submarines.
If you would describe yourself as slightly more introverted, Ian, how did you go about becoming well known and integrated and trusted and respected by all those thousands of engineers? Did you have anything that worked well for you in a big corporate?
Yeah, so you always discuss kind of how well it worked, but I think Rolls-Royce and engineering in Rolls-Royce is still very much a community sort of thing. The people in general have been in the business for quite a lot of years, and they've got sort of extensive networks around the company. And I think as an introvert, what I'm not good at necessarily is the initial first impressions, but I think I usually can build a good relationship with people over time. And so it was, fundamentally it was investing the time with people, getting to know people, usually sort of one-on-one or small groups. And you sort of think, well, how the hell can you make that work in an organisation of 15,000? You can't. You don't know all 15,000 personally, but in my head there was sort of, by the time I left Rolls-Royce, there were probably 200-300 of people that I would regard as the senior engineering population in the company, and I did absolutely make sure I knew those 200-300 people personally, sort of thing, that you have some level of relationship with them, because I think it's sorry, I think my ability to lead has always come from having that sort of bond of trust and the personal relationship. I don't think people typically feel any desire to follow me if I sort of stand up at the front and start waving my arms, sort of thing. But I think, you know, in the end, when people know you, I think they tend to. So it's kind of hard work, and it's particularly hard work in a sort of multi-site global organisation. But for example, the first time I had a team based in North America, I was spending 1 week a month in North America with that team because I needed to build the relationships with that group. When I inherited a team in Germany, similarly, you know, I spent at least a week a month getting to know the team, building the relationships. So I think it's actually one of the advantages of making a decision to work away from home. Because once I got to the point where I was away from my Newcastle base during the week, it really didn't bother me whether I was in the US, Germany, Singapore, Derby, Bristol, wherever. And I think that gave me the opportunity to put the face time in with my teams wherever they happen to be.
Tell me about your big moments at Rolls. When did you feel proudest as an engineer?
So I think it almost links a little back to what we've just been discussing it's getting the new products into service, typically after overcoming some significant challenge. So probably one of my biggest ones was being part of the team that saw the Queen Mary 2 cruise liner into service. As one of the guys in the shipyard said, you probably only get to do 100,000 horsepower once in your career. And I think the thing was, A, just getting something on that scale into service, but B, getting it into service against a backdrop that said we were having some really nasty in-service problems on some of the other cruise ships. And whilst by that stage we were convinced we knew how to fix them, we hadn't actually got all the customers to the point of being convinced that we knew how to fix them. So that was kind of a biggie. But then similarly, probably the next biggie was getting the A400M military transport, seeing that into service. Again, against a backdrop of some very serious problems with the gearbox that connects the engine to the propeller on that aircraft. I remember having to call Airbus up, I think 3 times in a week to advise them that it probably wasn't a good idea to display the aircraft at Farnborough Air Show because we weren't entirely confident about its ability to complete the manoeuvres with an intact gearbox. And getting from that sort of level of uncertainty around the program to a point of having a product that's successful in service. And I still occasionally see A400M doing circuits around Newcastle Airport. I still get a lump in my throat when I see that aircraft flying over. Yeah, no, I think seeing the sort of the big iconic products going into service is definitely the big sort of sense of achievement for me.
Of course, we think thousands of them were manufactured as well. Yeah. What about the slightly more negative side when things haven't gone quite to plan? Where have those examples come along in your career?
Yeah, I think probably from like an engineering and a kind of career leadership point of view. The first time I was leading a really significant sort of tens of millions size project, and I'll not name the project to not embarrass myself or others, but it was my first big sort of project leadership role, and for perfectly good reasons, there was a higher level decision within the company to take some of the resource off my project and put it onto another project. And I would never argue that wasn't the right priority decision. I think in my sort of youthful enthusiasm with a bit of naivety, I took the decision to soldier on manfully, and we would still try and sort of complete the project with limited resources, and we'd muddle through and do the best job we could. And fundamentally, as a consequence of that, the project took longer, was later, cost more money. And I think the big lesson I've learned that I hope I've taken into most projects since then is if you really find yourself in a situation where you haven't got around to what you need to do to do the project properly, it is usually better to stop and restart when you're at a point of being able to restart and do the job properly. And it kind of sounds simplistic, but I think particularly when you're a bit younger and a bit less experienced, there's a real kind of eagerness to please that says, yeah, we'll find a way, sort of thing. And it's just having the bravery, and I wish I'd been brave at that time to say, actually, no, we won't find a way. We'll get there better and probably quicker and cheaper in the end if we stop. Let those people that you need to do the other job go and do the other job. When I can have them back, then we'll get on and we'll go at it all guns blazing.
Do you ever feel as though there were any opportunities that you were offered that you didn't take, whether it was extra study or time in industry or a new appointment that you didn't take, which you look back and maybe wish you had?
Well, I try not to have regrets, because I think you never know what would have happened. But the one that I always have a slight wry smile over is I was actually doing a master's degree in computer science at Stanford University. So for context, the same university that was later to produce or same department that was later to produce the two guys who set up Google. And I was doing the master's degree. I was doing very well on it, and I got offered the opportunity to do a PhD in artificial intelligence. And I chose not to. I chose to come back and do a PhD in pure physics. And the reason that I didn't do that was, at the time, artificial intelligence was a very esoteric and slightly academic subject that most people couldn't really see going anywhere. So I think that was clearly, with hindsight, something of a misjudgment sort of thing. But who knows where it would have gone? But I suspect. At one level, I suspect most people who were my peers in that sort of master's cohort at Stanford probably went on to do sort of really exciting things in the tech industry in Silicon Valley sort of thing. So I think slightly unusual to have missed that.
Do you think your maths and physics would have played to a real interest in data analysis and machine learning, or do you think you probably would have enjoyed just staying at Rolls and cracking on, moving up through the ranks? So
I've always had an interest in that sort of IT space, having done the sort of the computer science degree, and I've sort of kind of stayed close to it. But I think in the end, I think in the end I did get greater satisfaction out of working for a company like Rolls-Royce, simply because of the reality of the product. I don't think I can get as much satisfaction out of a software product as I can about actually being able to go into a factory, go onto a flight line, go into a shipyard, and actually see something I've worked on, there in real life. I think that was, if I actually go back to it, that was the eye-opening thing for me when I first started at Parsons, to suddenly be in a situation where if I was ever unsure why I was here, I could walk down into a factory and I could see the pieces of metal I was working on the designs for back on my desk, sort of thing. And I think you don't get that, in a pure sort of IT world. Having said that, I think when you get the chance to work at the intersection of those two spaces, so AI as applied to some of these complex engineered products, I think there's that. If I'd been 20 years younger, I think that's an area where I could really have had some as fun. Things like AI for engine health monitoring, that kind of thing. I think I could really have enjoyed working in that space.
So Ian, you got to the position of chief engineer, and now you've come out into the outside world. Why haven't you done what some people do and just go buy a nice place in Spain and kick back and have an easier life? What have you done since leaving Rolls-Royce?
Yeah, so I did think about the easy life, I guess, and I'm not to say that I won't sort of go for the easy life at some point, but part of my sort of decision for the timing of when I left Rolls-Royce was to go early enough so that I had the time to do something else without it being something as intense as a full-time exec role. So I deliberately sort of, if you like, wanted to look around and do something different. My objective was probably to have sort of 50% easy life and 50% doing some engineering or engineering related activity. And I'm pleased to say that after sort of 12 months of working at it, I've just about got myself to the point of having that sort of balance. But it's a real miss. I'm lucky enough that I'm I can be fairly fairly relaxed about what I take on, and I don't have to sort of choose what I take on based on the amount of financial rewards. So based on that, I do a lot of work with the Royal Academy of Engineering, and I also do a lot of work with Durham University, both of which I do on a kind of pro bono basis, and I'm really enjoying working with both of those organisations, because they're both places where people quite regularly sort of get in touch with you and say, would you like to get involved with X, Y, Z sort of thing? And I do thrive on getting involved in something new sort of thing. So they're both sort of really good sources of new things coming along. But then, also wanted to do something that still had some sort of connection to the coalface. So managed to secure a non-exec directorship role at Techmark Group, which is not knowing anything about the offshore wind industry has been sort of fascinating to come in and see how that industry works. But also doing a bit of consultancy with a couple of other companies locally, British Engines and with the offshore renewables catapult up at Blythe, and also sort of some consultancy with one or two small startups as well. So it's really kind of enjoy doing that, and really enjoy the diversity that comes with that. Sometimes a little frustrating that you never quite get the sort of time and opportunity to really get into the details. I think so. It's taken a little while to get used to that, but as I say, really enjoyable to get such a widespread, and to be honest, to meet such a really interesting and sort of wide range of people through doing it.
Well, I think that's really important, because many of our corporate execs, they can get quite insular in terms of their organisation where they are, but you've definitely pushed your network over the last 12 months. I guess you and I have spent more time chatting over the last 12 months, but just in terms of the mechanics of how you expanded your network, what were just some of the simple things that you were doing to expand and realise all those opportunities?
Okay, yeah. So I think in some ways I might actually have been bizarrely fortunate by it happening during lockdown. Mainly because you can actually do more meetings in a space of time if you're not sort of travelling between those meetings. But fundamentally, it was about contacting as many people as I could. I think I was fortunate in that I think the Rolls-Royce name opens a lot of doors. I think the Royal Academy of Engineering name opens a lot of doors. But basically, I started with those people I did know in the region. I set up a half hour or an hour chat with them. I was always very careful to say I'm not particularly looking for you, whoever it is I'm talking to I'm not looking to you for a role necessarily. I'm just looking to find out what's going on, sort of thing, and maybe for you to suggest other people to talk to. Our key objective in most conversations was to get at least one other sort of contact out of that conversation, and it's a bit like R numbers in the pandemic sort of thing, as long as you can keep your R number greater than 1, then the network is continuing to grow, sort of thing. And what I found was, people were generally speaking generous with their time to talk, and usually, generous to pass you on to other people. And it is kind of still happening now. I'm pursuing it less aggressively than I was, but it really was very much just compile the first list of people to talk to, go around, talk to those people, make sure that out of those conversations you've got at least as many on the next round of the list, and just sort of keep working it. And I think what was really important of that, and which I hadn't really realised at the time, many of the things I've finished up doing have not come from the people who I would have sort of put most likely at the top of my list. I think a lot of the opportunities have come from sort of slightly left field or chance conversations. So just reinforced with me the need to go as broad as I possibly could in those conversations. I think if I'd focused it, which is sometimes my natural tendency, on the, if you like, the most likely, the highest priority opportunities, I probably wouldn't have as many things going on. Beyond that, Yes, I put a lot of effort into LinkedIn. In some ways, I find LinkedIn more useful for maintaining contact with an existing network rather than building the new network out. But it has been really useful to me if, people that I sort of established contact with 12 months ago now, I'm now finding LinkedIn a very useful tool for staying in contact with them. But I don't think I found that as useful for building out the network in the first place. That was very much just sort of the FaceTime of one Zoom call after another.
I hear this time and time again. We find it internally, it's very easy to be very strategic and think, if I speak to X person, I'll lead to Y to lead us, but it doesn't happen like that. And exactly as we'd find, you chat to other people, they refer you to different things. Sometimes it can be a corporate finance friend or an FD or someone in a totally different sector that brings forward that opportunity. So I guess for anyone listening to this, that's quite good advice, whether it's finding a new pro bono opportunity or non-exec or finding a new exec role or anything. It's to just keep having the openness of conversations to keep pushing it forward. Graduates, if I was sat here as a new grad or a younger version of Ian Ritchey back in the day, what kind of wisdom would you have for that person sitting in front of you?
Okay. So I think the first thing to say is if you can, I do think it's good to get onto a formal graduate training scheme. I think certainly the sort of thing that a lot of the big companies like Rolls-Royce run. I do think those things are do provide excellent training and give you an awareness of what the breadth of opportunities, what the breadth of what engineering is. Because I think it's very hard to get that breadth and understanding within universities. So I think number one would be try and get a scheme like that, even if, I probably shouldn't say this from a corporate perspective, even if you've got no intention of working for the big corporate all your life, that training that you'll get in those sort of schemes is definitely worth having, in my view. But then beyond that, I think what I say to a lot of sort of younger engineers, maybe people who are in those graduate programs, is kind of don't overthink it. I do see people occasionally come along with they've drawn up this complicated matrix of all the experiences they want to get and the role they want to have by when and what they need to do on the way to it. My experience is it's never as structured or organised as that. And I think the main thing is just take the opportunities. Don't overthink it. If you're any good, you'll do well. You'll make the best out of that opportunity, and then another opportunity will come along. So I think I say don't be too precious about the opportunities. I mean, somebody who gave me our first engineering director in Rolls-Royce said to me, "Do you know the reason I offered you the job, Ian, was because I knew you'd take it." Which I was a little insulted by, because I hope he also offered it to me because he thought I'd do it well. But I think, I did get a reputation for, I would always go for the next opportunity sort of thing. And I think even if it didn't sort of fit into my structured career plan sort of thing.
Given your time again, Ian, would you do anything differently? Or would you have a different career route if you're given the time again?
I do think back to something we touched on right at the start. I think given my time again, I probably would do an engineering degree.
You could have been a recruiter like me.
I could have been a recruiter. I think I don't think there's any harm in doing a pure science degrees, and I certainly wouldn't want to put people with pure science degrees off going into to engineering. But equally, I think it might have opened even more doors for me in engineering if I had gone down that route. And I think I hope schools are better now than they were then. But I think there were some schools that had a slightly snobbish attitude towards engineering, and I'd really hope to try to sort of dispel that attitude and hope that somebody advising myself would have steered me towards engineering rather than pure science.
Mm-hmm. And your network now is if anyone's watching this, what else can we do to support you, Ian, with your journey, either with your professorship at Durham or your connections or the clients that you're working with? Is there anything that anyone can do to add value to your network?
So something that I'm finding that I'm enjoying more than I thought I would is making connections for other people. Right. A side benefit of having sort of this, if you like, legacy network from Rolls-Royce and the aerospace industry, and then B, having built a new network is, you've actually got quite a big network. Because I'm working with quite a few different organisations, you quite regularly come across somebody and you think, well, actually, if you talk to them, there might be some value in that, and it's not typically something I'm even looking for anything for myself out of. I just, genuinely find it, satisfying to think, well, actually, those two people are talking to each other. So, I guess in terms of then how other people can help, I think it is just, if you like, continuing to build and grow the network, because there's more opportunities to do that. The big thing is, and I suppose, I don't know whether this is good or bad, but I progressively realise that I'm probably more used to a lot of people for my contacts than I necessarily am for any sort of profound business or technical insight that I'm going to give them. And at one level, that's a little depressing, but at another level, it's nice to be able to be useful.
Absolutely. Ian, it's been delightful to catch up. For anyone that is watching this who hasn't met you before, I'd strongly encourage, Ian, that people do connect with you. And equally, if there's anything we can do, or our wider network, we'll certainly do that. But Ian, it's been delightful, an amazing career, and thank you so much for your time. It's been great.
No, thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Cheers, Ian. All the best. Thank you.
Thanks.